This is Abe Friedtanzer from ShockYa, and I'm thrilled to be speaking with Julian Higgins and Shaye Ogbonna, the filmmaking team behind God's Country, which is playing at the Sundance Film Festival. How are you both doing today?
Doing great.
Very good. Thank you for having us.
Of course, thanks for being with me. From what I understand, this film is based on a short story called Winter's Light. What appealed to you about it when you first read the story?
So I read the story over a decade ago in December of 2010, of all things. I was sitting in a snowy blizzard in New Hampshire at the time, so it was very fitting. The story at its center is about a character whose kind of ethical and moral code just runs like a Mack truck into the reality of the world. And it's kind of it's a story about how he sort of realizes that the way he's been living his life doesn't serve him and doesn't, deliver the results that he hopes to see in the world. And that I thought was a really fascinating question, and it's not an easy question to resolve. And in fact, the story is quite abrupt. I loved how kind of challenging the story was. It really left me thinking about the ideas that were raised in the story instead of trying to answer every question. And that's what really drew me to it initially, was that this is this internal conflict within this main character. Of course, in the short story Winter Light, it is an older white man, and when I did a short film adaptation of that story, it was pretty direct, and it was both in terms of the story itself, but also the character. And then Shaye and I have obviously done a whole new adaptation of that same short story, going in quite a different direction.
Yeah, I mean, it was once we decided to change the character from a white man over 50 to a black woman in her 40s, it changed the dynamic. It changed the dynamic of the material, and obviously it opened it up. Just that little change. Well, not obviously it's a huge change, but in terms of that character, just all of a sudden it feels like the world's expanded, because when you look at her and see her in this landscape, she's clearly an outsider versus like in the original story.
And we thought it would be really interesting to place the audience, no matter who you are, in the point of view of that character, so that you're experiencing this kind of somewhat familiar genre of the Western from that outsider perspective, and looking at it and kind of going, this is strange. Why do we do it this way? That was sort of the spark of what became God's Country.
I did find it to be a bit of an unconventional focus on academia in a non-liberal setting, because I feel like we often see that. I actually was thinking about the Netflix series The Chair in some ways, which is obviously couldn't be more different from what this movie is, but there are some interesting overlapping themes. And I'm curious about the idea of how you felt approaching that in this, I guess, Midwestern setting.
Well, I come from a large family of academics, so a lot of that was the stuff of dinner table conversations when I was growing up. Both my parents are college professors. I now teach at several film schools. My grandparents. So it really was a world that I feel like I have experienced personally and also know quite well. And that is it's a small element of the original short story. The character is a professor in the original short story, but we felt, because we wanted to talk about the systems around human beings that drastically affect their lives, and not in ways that you can really point to, like just the whole constellation of these dynamics that come to bear on this very kind of contained, seemingly straightforward conflict between these people. And so it felt like it was worth building that out. And Shaye and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how we would be able to, bring the themes we wanted to explore into these different contexts. So we see in the movie her world of where she works, but we also see the hunters' world of where they live and what their sort of home is like. And of course we see her world and understand a lot about where she came from and her backstory as well.
And what is the relationship that both of you have with Montana and that region of the US?
You're muted, Shaye.
I was actually muted. I have zero relationship with Montana and that part of the world. However, like I've grown up mostly in urban settings, in diverse urban settings. But obviously, I'm gonna say obviously, but I've driven through America. I think the experiences, at least for me, as I think for a Black person or person of color, driving through rural America, I think is a bit different than, and I actually challenge many people to do it just to get a sense of it. Because the way I view it, obviously places like Montana are beautiful, right? But for me, I get a different perspective. I look at, this is a beautiful place, but I can feel the pain in the land, you know what I mean? From the dark side of Manifest Destiny, from the dark side of, colonialism or whatever you want to call it. So I don't have, it's weird, like I don't have any direct relation to Montana at all, or the American West. But when I'm there, I definitely feel a sense of connectivity because of that unique perspective I have of rural areas in this particular country. Like the funny thing is, like, even though I grew up very urban, my family, like, we came from the most rural parts of Georgia. You know what I mean? So that's probably where the connectivity comes from for me, but I have no specific direct connection to Montana.
Yeah, and like the film is not explicitly set in Montana. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to feel a little bit like just the West, we don't identify it. I have had wonderful experiences in Montana, and we shot both the short and the feature in Montana. James Lee Burke lives in Montana, and when we were early in the process, Shaye and I went up there together to talk with him and kind of drive around and just get a feel for it. Montana is an absolutely stunning place, and of course, as the film alludes to, all of America is the site of ongoing, colonialization, essentially, and so it's real duality. I mean, it's a beautiful place, but the land itself represents the history that took place there. And that was why, I think, one of many reasons why it was so important to put this character in the landscape and have the landscape feel as present as it does in the movie.
It also seems like this jives very well with the Sundance opening before every film that talks about a land acknowledgement, which goes beyond, honoring Native peoples, which is done in previous years, to really talk about what we're doing to our earth. And so I don't know if you see any, further connections there, or that's just a sort of happy coincidence that your film,
Well, I mean, I wish that none of these themes were relevant at all. I wish that it was not a nation that fundamentally denies its own history. But unfortunately, that is the country that we live in, and it's the main problem we have to solve. And one of the things that, the movie is trying to get into is this idea that all of these things are cycles. And until we acknowledge and tell the truth about things that have happened in the past, we will just continue repeating those cycles. I mean, it's a quote everyone knows, but so yeah, I mean, the land acknowledgement, I mean, we also have a land acknowledgement in the end credits. I just always ask myself when I hear that, what is being done concretely? But yes, I think it's really important to acknowledge. It's just one of many ways that we can start to be honest about our own history.
Absolutely. And this film is understandably very dark. Did you want to make sure that it wasn't too, bleak, or was that just sort of something that might have come along with it?
It's so weird. It's like people say, it's obviously it's dark and it has a bleakness to it, but I've heard people's perspectives on that, and I don't know why I mean, obviously the ending is the ending. I've seen it as a very true and a very honest film. And for some people that's bleak, and for some people it's cathartic, for lack of a better word. So that's kind of like, it's interesting to hear people say that, because I've never actually thought about that as we were writing the film and as they were making the film, and it clearly has those themes in it, but that's not something that we were actually it wasn't intentional. You know what I mean?
Yeah, our the way we started writing the script was we literally talked for 6 months about all the things we think about our politics and our families and our own stories and our psychology and what we want to try to deal with. I mean, every time you make a movie, it's an opportunity to learn about yourself and about others. That's actually kind of fundamentally why I do it. I feel like my world expands and my understanding deepens when I work on something. And so we started with just talking about what's important to us for a very long time. And then began the process of trickling that down into an outline and lines of dialogue, you know. But the goal for us was to tell the truth about our feelings and our thoughts. And you know, we did experiment with things that maybe would have been more sort of expected out of either a genre piece or just you know, a film in general. And whenever we tried to make something happen that was sort of to produce a certain result for the audience, it just stuck out like a sore thumb. And so many of the choices that I think people might consider to be bold choices in the movie came to us when we were sort of like, okay, well, what is honest, you know? And I really think the job is to tell the truth regardless of the implications and get the audience to consider what that means.
I like that perspective. I appreciate it. Thank you. And of course, I don't know how we've spoken for this long without mentioning your fantastic lead star, Tandy Newton. Did you know that once you decided, you know, the age and the race of the character, of gender, did you know that this is who you wanted for this role?
It's like, now in hindsight, having seen you know, her work, once she came into the project, there was no doubt that she was the perfect person to do it. It is not something that humble independent filmmakers could ever say they expected, you know, to have someone of her experience and her talent and her caliber come into our little indie film, you know. But like, she is literally the dream for both of us. It's hard to imagine. It's a very difficult role to play because you have to believe so many different things about her. Mm-hmm. You have to buy them on a kind of a gut level. And I honestly cannot think of anyone else that could do this. And I think her work speaks for itself.
I agree. And what has the experience been being at Sundance thus far?
I mean, it's interesting.
It's interesting, yeah, especially because it's virtual. It's my first Sundance. You know what I mean? I haven't been to a lot of film festivals, so this is my first Sundance, and so experiencing it virtually has been in itself an experience. Well, obviously this is an achievement, you know, for all of us involved, but it's also a reflection of the times we're living in. You know what I mean? So it's been a very interesting experience.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, don't get us wrong. We are so unbelievably just bowled over to be included.
Absolutely.
It is really the ultimate destination for an indie film. So like, it doesn't get any better than this. Now, we have nothing to compare it to. So I will say I'm having a wonderful time. I have no idea what it's like to walk Main Street and feel the buzz of, you know, the festival. This is awesome as far as we're concerned. You know, it truly feels like a once in a lifetime experience.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me about this film and give me some more things to think about with it. And I wish you the best of luck in the future.
Thank you for your questions. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Very thoughtful questions. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very nice to meet you guys.
All right, take care.